What are we doing, Sharks?
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the League of Inches podcast season review special. We've got the final one, so I appreciate everyone being on board with this one. I appreciate my boys, the League of Inches boys who have helped me along the way. And I appreciate all the guests that we've had on to talk, and it's been great to mingle, communicate, and get others' points of views around their teams and things like that. And the views and the reactions and stuff have all been up for this sort of series we've had. So I appreciate you all sticking with us, and we've all got through this together. So the West Tigers, lucky last, I guess, in a way. We're supposed to get them done a bit early, but we didn't get around to it. But boys, I got Jake, I got Micka with me once again for this one. I'll throw to you first, Jake. When I mention the West Tigers and their season as a whole, what comes to mind? How do you describe the West Tigers year?
Look, obviously the answer is going to be they came last. That's a fail, right? We all know that, you're not going to go 3 consecutive wooden spoons and say, oh, we're doing really good. But one thing I'm going to say is that I feel that they looked a different team under Benji a little bit. Like, there was times in the season where I've gone, like, they're not going to come last. They might come second last, third last, but they're making improvements. The actual difference between the amount of wins that they got, though, was significantly higher than the last 2 years. I think they got a total of 18 points. Pretty sure they ended up on 18 points, whereas the last year and the year before that, they ended up finishing on 9 points or something. So they've got more wins in them this year than they did previously. It's just that so did other teams, unfortunately, for them. But I'd have to say, yeah, again, it is a fail, but
I love it. I love the description there, Jake. And we'll get into it a bit more. But Micka, what about yourself? When I ask you how you felt like the Tiger season went, what do you sort of put it down to?
I don't know. I know they got more wins, but I find it hard to say they went any better than the 2 seasons before. People were pegging them for the wooden spoon way before the season ended. There's some pretty high scores against them when you roll through their draw. Like, a lot of 50 points is 58-6 and plenty of high 40s. And I mean, the Spoon Bowl, Parramatta beating them 60-26. Like, Parramatta had a pretty shit-ass year. So I don't know. I find it hard to say that they did go any better, really. I know they had flashes of, I guess, positivity in Galvin coming through and a few things like that. But I think for them, the big change is going to be next year. Like, they've got that massive changes coming in their roster with May and Luai and a few other things like that. I think that's where we'll finally see the tables turn, I guess, and get Benji's footprint in on the team more than he has had a chance in the last couple of years. Because I don't know. I just don't think they've really changed that much in the last couple of years for me.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
please.
So I was just looking up. So to clarify, they won 6 this year as opposed to winning 4 only in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
In terms of total points, where is it? I'm looking here. No, that's not what I'm talking about.
See, extra bye this year.
No, but here it is. So yeah, that's true. But they're 4 this year. So the last 2 years were 352 and 385, which are dismal, right? This year was 463. So putting on points, they put on an extra 100 points in the season, right? Now I understand that that's not something ridiculous, but it is an improvement. There is signs, first year coach in, there are signs of improvement. Against, though, and here's the issue, 750, whereas the last 2 years were 679 and 675. So you can tell that the focus was, let's score more points than we can see. That's kind of, I feel like, what Benji was going for there. Let's put more points on the board than we get back, but they didn't have the team to do it. I do think with the new team that they're about to have, that will change. But I just thought I'd mention that there was some improvement this year overall, not, a little.
And it makes sense. Like, I guess those players that come through, like Galvin and that, they're attacking players. You'd want to think that they're going to get more points, but I mean, they're also young, and we know that young players aren't the best defensively yet, as seen in the lower grades, I suppose.
It's an interesting point, and it sort of gets me into the first sort of point I made here, and it was around the Benji Marshall, the first year of being a head coach and being the main guy there at the time. There was obviously rumors about last year and him pulling the strings with Sheen's there being the face as the coach type thing. But I guess that aligns into, I guess, as those stats rightly point out, Jake, those numbers where maybe he has said to him this year, pressure's off. Like we're expected to get the spoon, which they ended up doing, so they met expectation. But let's go out and at least try and achieve something while we're going it. Like we've got nothing to lose here, boys. We've got a young squad coming through. We won't win the competition this year. We'll be realistic about this, but let's try and cause some trouble. Did they? I'm not too sure. Did Benji Marshall have a great first year as coach? Is it going to be marked as a success? I don't think so. But what do you boys think? Jake, do you think Benji's first year as coach can be a pass mark? Can it be as classed as successful?
Again, I don't think the word could be passed. This is why I'm struggling with this. I don't think the word could ever say that it's got to be a fail. You came last, right? No team that comes last gets a pass mark. I'm just trying to find those. How do I put this? I'm just trying to find like positives out of his season, and I'd say that the positive I'm seeing is they were able to put an extra 100 points on the board than what they have in the last 2 seasons. So there has been improvement without still giving him a pass. Improvement, but not enough improvement, if that makes sense.
Is that going to cut the mustard though? Let's talk. What I mean by that is this West Tigers venture and this fan base has been through the ringer, and this isn't Benji's fault. This is more pressure on the board, in my opinion. This is more pressure on the club management because they've enlisted Benji Marshall. Let's go back 2 years ago. I know this is a 2024 review, but they basically signed Benji like 2 years ago to say you'll be the coach in 2 years' time, which at the time I remember everyone saying was absurd. Like, why would you even have that sort of a contract in place? The game changes drastically. You don't know if Benji's even going to be a first-grade coach. He hasn't served really an apprenticeship, in my opinion. Then he's been thrust straight in to become the West Tigers head coach who haven't played finals football since I think it was 2010's the record. So it's crazy numbers. And to have that into a rookie coach, again, I'm not trying to bag Benji. I just don't think he was up to it this year. And whether he's going to be up to it next year as well, we don't know yet. We'll talk about that in the 2025 preview stuff. But there was a lot of pressure on him. And I know, like you said, the attack was sort of there. And granted, that probably comes with having some of these good young players come in, and Olam at centre there probably helped a bit. Galvin, a really good young sort of attacking player there. Coruscant had his moments, but the defensive side of things, that was the alarming thing to me because that's an attitude. And for mine, these kids should be coming in with an attitude. I know they're not really there to defend and can't defend well, but their attitude should be there to be playing and to be keen to be there on the field and play for their coach. I guess the question would be, did they end up playing for their coach in Benji? And Micka, is this Benji Marshall first year a success?
No, I agree with Jake. You can't. It's very hard to call it a success, isn't it? I think what you said there is spot on about defense being an attitude. I think if they'd have come out this year and they'd won as many games as they've won, but they weren't getting flogged and they were defending better, and you could see him trying to do those 1%ers, I think that would be a bit of a success for Benji because that means he's changed their mentality. But for me, and you look at some of the games they lost, like they scored enough points to win. Some of the games they lost and they still scored 30 points. Like, that just means that you didn't defend good enough, right? And until that changes, that's when it'll be a success for him. And I feel like a lot of the reason they've scored extra points this year is probably because they went out with some young players who are used to just playing that attack and lower grade footy. Just, we're going to get the spoon anyway. Let's just go out and try and score as much as we can. I don't think they actually put the forethought into we need to defend ourselves to get these wins. So when that changes, and that'll come with a few of, I guess they're hoping it's going to come with Luai and his experience in the Penrith system and things like that. When that changes, that's when I'd say that Benji, you can say, yep, Benji's achieved something there.
And it's funny because the big game that I guess sums up this attitude was that last game, that spoon bowl, let's call it, against the Eels, who we all know, being sort of Paris supporters, Para was shocking. They were shocking this year, and they were there for the taking in that game. They just weren't there form-wise, had half a team out, basically. This was build for the Tigers, and I don't want to kick you while you're down. Sorry, guys, listening, but basically their biggest game in recent time, like a spoon bowl, like to not get the spoon. That's where the sort of the club was at, and to turn up and concede what they did, and they can't excuse it. It was at Combank. It was at home. It was a big, huge crowd. There was a noisy game, and that everyone there packed to the rafters. They just started to get some fans back on board, and to produce that should have been like, it's weird to say, but that was their grand final at the moment. That was their game to go, all right, let's go. And just, we got the opposite. Like, I as a Para fan, I'm glad we won, but I was also in a way a bit like gutted for the Tigers, because I was like, felt like they started to get a little bit of excitement with what was happening for next year. Some of those signings already confirmed. Then we got this. Like, and again, I know there was a lot of kids there, and they might have been overawed by the situation. I don't know, but it's just a weird one to end on. But that was just attitude shithouse.
Man, I took an hour annual leave so I could leave work early that day to get home and watch that with me kids. Like, the build up to that game, and when they cut across to the coverage and the commentator was like, "Welcome to the Spoon," like people everywhere, and like they NRL promoted that ridiculously well. Like, it was really well done for a game that shouldn't matter to anyone. And I was excited, and for them then to turn up like they did at home to try and avoid their third wooden spoon in a row. You're right. Like, to me, that summed up their attitude, and how that I don't think they've changed in the last 3 years. So, that was a cool part of history to be a part of. There's only ever been 8 legitimate spoon bowls in the history of the NRL, and we won one of them.
Well, certainly did. Jake, you got anything to add in terms of, I know you basically started this conversation.
I would love to add actually something. So, as a coach, we don't necessarily yet know what Benji's got. Now, I say that in the sense that what did he have when who did he have coming into this team, realistically, right? Not necessarily, you got Coruscant and you got young Galvin coming up, but Galvin wasn't even supposed to be their starting halfback this year. Like, he only just came up and we realized how good he was as he played. But realistically, look at that squad and tell me, who's a comp winner there. One thing that I will say because you were talking about the board as well for Tigers. I'm fairly certain this year the board switched over to new people because they got voted out. I could be wrong on that.
There was a couple of changes,
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that happened. The board that did the whole Benji Marshall thing, the original plan was for him to take a 2-year traineeship necessary kind of thing under Sheen. That didn't end up happening. Obviously, he was every year. But one thing I want to say about Benji, you ask any player who's up and coming, who's in that age now, like that age to sort of start coming up, into first grade, ask any one of them who was their favorite player growing up, and I guarantee you they are going to say Benji Marshall. Pretty much anyone that at that age roughly that I see would say Benji Marshall. And I'd say his biggest selling point as coming in with being the marquee kind of person that he is actually recruitment. That is what I think. When was the last time you heard of the Tigers signing a good marquee player like Jerome Luai? When did that happen last time?
Yeah.
Yesterday with Terrell May.
And who's that?
No, I know
coach?
what you mean.
Probably Coruscant
would have been their last one.
Yeah, okay, fair. And how much did they have to give him to come across?
Overs.
And don't get me wrong,
to the point where he
overs
laughed about it in the grand final interviews and stuff. So,
yeah. At the same time, he also knew he would be there during Benji's tenure, so I don't even know if I can necessarily count that. Even before that, I'm seeing if you can think of anyone you could think of. I can't personally. And so now that Benji, is over there, and obviously Coruscant's come across, but how many signings is that? Terrell May, Jerome Luai, Olam. I don't know if you could probably count him as possibly a bit of a marquee kind of signing, maybe. There's 2 or 3 there, and it's only going to improve.
Hastings.
I don't know. My biggest thing for him, I guess, is not necessarily, and obviously he has to be able to coach. That matters, but that matters more than anything. But I think recruitment and the people that wanted to play under him is important.
Yeah.
I agree. You make a good
What are you
point.
laughing at?
One thing I'll come back at you for, whether he's their
Yeah.
favourite player or not, a lot of young players coming through, I think they've shown this year, to counter your argument, that hasn't meant anything, because we're just questioning how they've turned up to games and how they've sort of their mentality to games. Like Benji Marshall is this great player, and I posted the question in our page a few months ago about this, but I have concerns around this coaching era of Benji, and if it ends up having an effect on how people remember him playing wise, and it shouldn't, but I just think naturally it has a risk, because he was this great player. He's adored by so many, as you rightly say, Jake. But what's going to happen next year when they're up against the Storm or Penrith again, and he's actually got to outsmart that coach tactically. They're not going to sit there and go, "Oh, it's Benji Marshall, I'm in awe of you." They don't care. They're going to outsmart him and have a game plan. Is Benji ready for a game plan like that? I don't think he is. He hasn't had. I'm a big advocate, and look, to go back on it, and it's funny, but for mine, Brad Arthur is a player, is a coach where he had a fantastic intro into coaching, and he's done it for mine the right way. He went to bush footy. He's done it for lower grades. He's done the whole thing. He's been a coach now for years on years on years, and yeah, it didn't end up finishing well with Para, but damn, he achieved a lot with that club from basically a guy when they first signed him that no one really knew of, and was thinking, Brad Arthur? Parramatta just signed Brad Arthur? Like, they're trying to win a comp. What have they done? And for mine, that shows if you're a coach out there and you're done the right sort of procedures to get to where you're getting, then naturally up the progression, you've created something. Like, it just felt like, in a way, Benji's skipped the queue in front of a lot. And I just don't think at this time he's the coach for West Tigers moving forward. It might be incorrect because, as you said, Jake, the recruitment-wise, this has been their best recruitment for probably 10 years, maybe 15 years. Like, it's been that good, their recruitment side of things. But it's just there's a lot more of the coaching game these days than just being a recruitment and being a guy that people are in awe of. And I love the point, and I hope it works for the Tigers if that's the avenue they're hoping to go down. Maybe he should have been more of a sort of a recruitment guy then. Maybe he should have been a guy that was just I don't know. It just feels like to me the best guy there was Madge. They sacked him, they got rid of him, and it felt like now looking back on it, they needed that hard nose. They need that hard nosed coach. It's not going to take crap. I know it was. We've seen the Tiger, the tail of Tiger, whatever it's called, and we saw the F-bombs, but clearly Madge can coach. He's shown it in Origin this year, and it's a funny one.
Well, look, at the start of their preseason, 5 of them turned up nowhere near ready to the point where they got breach notices from the board. Like, we're not talking about blokes turning up 3 kilos overweight here, are we? So they're already not taking next year seriously.
It's an interesting one. On a positive for Tigers fans listening and stuff, I do want to mention a couple of ones. Lockie Galvin, we've mentioned him a little bit already so far in this podcast. Enormous. And I don't want to put too much unnecessary pressure or noise around him. I think there's already way too much for the kid. But after his first year, he's almost become a staple 5'8" in the game in a way, already up there with, you could make arguments for he's already a top 5 sort of 5'8" in the game. There is still some things to his game that he needs to improve, and he'll naturally get there. But I'm so impressed by his first year. I reckon if he's had this year at a top 8 club, we'd be talking a lot more highly of him. But because it was the Tigers, because we've questioned already that playing group at the moment and how they act, I think he's been impacted a little bit. But to produce what he has shows the quality of player that he is, Micka. Like, what do you make of his season this year, Lockie Galvin?
Yeah, it would have been tough being a kid his age coming in and having to basically try and drag that team up. I think he's got a lot of confidence about him. Some will probably call it arrogance, I guess, but I guess to be in that position and do what he did, you got to be a bit cocky and back yourself sometimes, right? Otherwise, some of the plays that he pulled off don't happen in the first place. Confidence is a key to success. I think he'll only get better and better and better. My question will be is if the Tigers don't turn it around soon, are they going to be able to keep him? Which will be very sad because they've needed a player like him to come through their juniors and play for their club for a while. So I think him and the fullback is Jerome Bueller.
Dream Buller, yeah.
Dream Buller, yeah. I mean, those two are players they can build a pretty good first grade squad around and should be there for the right reasons. So, yeah, he was something else, wasn't he? Fuck, he pissed me off when they beat us in round 3 or whatever it was.
They've got potential to become a really, really good spine. And obviously, we're not trying to talk too much about next year, but there are signs there for a really, really good, handy spine in years to come. Jake, what did you make of Galvin's year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're talking individual players, I'd say his year was absolutely a success. He came out, he showed what he was doing. He increased his value by heaps if he did decide to go to another club. I think one thing I'll say about him is I didn't love that whole stuff that happened in the middle of the year where he got recognised, he was playing really well, and all of a sudden he wanted to get out really quickly when they were playing really bad. And I'm like, I don't know, you've been given this opportunity to get first grade time and to be playing sort of consistently. Maybe try to repay that first before you. And I don't know all the details and stuff, but it just didn't really just didn't really sit right with me. And
I agree with
other than that, the guy is obviously a weapon. He's got a short kicking game. He can kick long. He's some depth to his kicks as well. And passing wise, he knows where to put the ball. Plus, he can run. So he's almost the complete package already. And I do think that with a good halfback next to him, that is in command of the team, it kind of lets him have that freedom to sort of run. Plus, you got Dream at the back, and I just think that at the moment, I'd say it was a success. I'd say for him in particular. He's the success story coming out of the Tigers this year, if I had to say there was one.
While you're flying, let me know your thoughts around Appy Coruscant's season as well.
I think for the games that they did win, he basically dragged them. He was basically the Clint Gutherson of them for this year. He was dragging them through the games that they did win by his teeth, grabbing them by the shirts and going, "Come with me, we're going to win this game." Don't get me wrong, I don't think that it was I don't think it was actually his best season, but I think because he didn't necessarily have other than Galvin sort of around him, he had to do it mostly on his own, like he did the year before. And I think, and I know this, I'm not talking about next year, but I just think with some more competency around him, he is going to shine again next year. He's going to find a lot more form than he did this year, because this year he looked good, but again, it always felt like he had to do it on his own.
You could tell he was pretty frustrated by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah. I think he'll need the off season, and I think that I think it will make a difference coming in next year. Plus, we're having Luai back. Like I think they were mates back at the Panthers, and I think that'll help him a bit because he won't maybe feel as isolated.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. Like I do agree with sort of what you're saying. I think it's hard to be too critical of him because the Tigers were very, very ordinary, and it's hard to play, I guess, with players and try to get to a certain level that you can get to personally when you're surrounded by, I guess, players that can't reach that as well. And I guess for what he did, he's done what he can. But I agree with you. Like for some reason, I've heard a lot of people rave about his year and just be like, he was head and shoulders the player of the year for the Tigers. But I don't see it that clearly. I don't think he was that good. I actually think he was fairly average for his standards. But because he's at the Tigers, that looked a lot better than I guess his season was as a whole. Where if he had that year 2 years ago for Penrith, I think we'd be going, "Oh, Appy, he's nowhere near Blues contention." Like it'd be one of those seasons, I guess, in a way. So,
say one thing. I think if there's any team where you're not really, other than I know Gavin, but if you're not seeing that, like if you're saying that your hooker is like having the best game out of everyone every game, a team that's going to win games shouldn't have their hooker be. Your hooker should almost be sneaky and be that one that pops up and gets a try here and there and does that. It's like he's their main attraction, but your hooker shouldn't be. That's not what your hooker should be. That's not what their role is in a team. They shouldn't be that superstar. That's not what a hook. Anyway, that's my personal take on that. But I think any team that's wanting to win games shouldn't. Every team shouldn't be going, watch the hooker. That's their only sort of threat. That's never a good sign.
Yeah, they should just be popping up randomly. As you see, like with Harry Grant, I reckon that's a perfect example of what you're trying to explain, where the Storm is started, and it's often games where you almost forget Harry Grant and he's sensational. So That's sort of where we're at there. Just one player I want to sort of question and put the spotlight on, and his time in the club has come to a finish. So I guess it's a bit of a wider question in terms of how we rate his time there. Isaiah Papali'i. He came from the Eels and was probably the second row of the competition at the time. And for mine, has just basically robbed the Tigers. Well done to him for the deal that he got. But he just didn't produce whatsoever. And again, it just goes back to the culture at the club. It goes back to, I guess, what they're doing there. What are they playing for? Because how drastic this turn of form has been for Isaiah, it's crazy. Micka?
I think that goes to something I mentioned when we were talking about Newcastle, and it's your halves. Isaiah at Parramatta, the year they made the grand final, was running off Moses and making a lot of good runs, running good angles into holes that were created for him at pace, no fear. He didn't have that opportunity. He never had that opportunity at the Tigers. No one ever put him in a hole. And then Galvin, when he came through, he was on the other side of the field predominantly. So I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, Isaiah had a pretty simple game at Parramatta. Just run through the hole that Moses is going to put you in. And yeah, he did it well. Don't get me wrong. Nothing, not taken away from anything there, but he just never got that chance at the Tigers, and it sort of saw him fall back into the form that he had before he got to Parramatta to start with. I think on his defence at the Tigers, he was found out a fair bit. He was starting to get that way at the end of his time at Parramatta. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes after another sea change next year. They'd be disappointed, the Tigers, in what they got out of him. Like
100%.
But I don't think I don't think it's entirely his fault.
Yeah. We'll get to the questions in a second. Just one thing quickly I want to mention. Discipline needs to improve drastically for the Tigers. They shot themselves in the foot way too many times this year in terms of probably being the most sin bin or send off teams by a mile this year. That was just almost got to the stage where I think it was like 7-8 games in a row. They got one player and sometimes they get two. Like it was just ridiculous. Like no team should be getting that. And the other quick one is losing becomes a habit. Losing mentality is very hard to get out of. And that's the big thing and the big worry there for the Tigers at the moment and how it was this year. And was there improvement? Perhaps there was improvement at times, but just the way that losing in that club has become part of its culture, part of its DNA. It is a huge, huge year coming up to off season. Luai has the biggest job I think we've seen for an individual player since probably Joey at Newcastle. Like that's what's going to have to happen there with Luai. He has to go in there and teach this whole club, not just playing group, the club.
Yeah, whole club.
He's gone. I was just going to say,
enjoy football on a Wednesday and don't take it.
Oh,
go on.
Oh, just because you stopped. Sorry, you froze. Not just him though. Terrell May. Obviously, they just signed Terrell May as well, and I think leading from the front, especially because he was at the Roosters and they won a lot of games and they had a lot of success as well. I think that Luai might be a bit of a forward for a leader for the backs, but I think that Terrell May is going to make a massive difference to that. Why are we giving up, boys? Get in there and let's keep pushing kind of thing. I think that those two combined are going to be huge. I think that personally with Luai having that, he's going to have that winning mentality. He has to. They've won 4 comps in a row. No one that's won 4 comps in a row doesn't have a winning mentality. Does that kind of make sense? And we know he's a competitor. I think with him coming back, Appy's going to find his spark again. And I do think that there's going to be a bit of a chain reaction between those two. Galvin is still young enough and he's won enough at a younger age that he's still got that drive in him to want to win. I think the Dream Bull is kind of the same. Like they've got a spine now that knows how to win. And I actually think that that's going to make a big difference there.
Yeah. No, I get rapid fire question time. Time's to end this. Our key moment of the year for the Tigers. I'll go to Jakey boy first.
Gavin's debut. 100% Gavin's debut. Get it once as soon as he got on the field, we all saw what a superstar he can be and will be, 100%. And I think that actually won them. He kind of helped win them a few games as well through the year.
Micka?
I'm trying to think of one, to be honest. I'll probably have to say the same, but just looking back through their draw, if there's any standout moments to me. I do remember, this is a long time ago, when they beat the Sharks in round 3. Everyone's like, oh, geez, maybe they've turned the corner. And then obviously they had the tough game against us the next week, which they won, and then got beat by the Dolphins. And then it sort of went downhill from there. I feel like that could have been a key moment. Like, I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but am I talking shit there, or do you remember that as well? Like, there was it's like a weight was lifted off them for a week or two, and everyone's like, oh yeah, like they're playing that free flowing footy, and this is what we want the Tigers to be like. And that's probably the big talk. Everything else I remember about the Tigers was probably not that positive, but I remember that 2 weeks for Tigers fans was really buzzing. So I guess that's an odd key moment to have, and probably not quite what you're after, but that's probably the one thing I remember for their, other than the Spoon Bowl, remember out of their season this year. In trying to pick something different than Galvin, obviously.
For mine, I will lock in, and I know it's a weird time, it's the end of the year, but just that loss to the Eels, that Spoon Bowl for mine because for mine, unfortunately, just summed up where the club's still at. And it just hasn't really improved whatsoever over almost like a 3 or 4 year period now. It's just, I hate kicking them while they're down, but that was shocking. Surprise packet of the year, Micka.
Well, I'm gonna pick Galvin in this one, because I actually
got there before I could.
Yeah, I hadn't seen much of him before this year, so for me that was a nice little surprise.
I'll go Samuela Fainu, the edge back rower for the Tigers, and good young player. Again, they've got a couple of good quality young kids going through, and I thought he was a very, very good player on that edge for the Tigers. Jake?
Can it be a negative surprise packet, or does it have to be positive?
Wherever you want. Go wherever you want, mate.
I'll turn it around. I'll turn it around and go Isaiah Papali'i. He was in fine form after leaving the Eels. You know, it was still in form for us when he left, and he went over there and I suppose I know that was 2 years now, but I still just think, no, that's all right. I feel like I've just made a mistake here, but that's okay. I thought maybe he did. Yeah, I'll go with it again.
You gotta own it.
I'll own it. I guess I thought he would do better than he did. I've realized that he was there for 2 years, not one. In my brain, he was only there for the 1 year for some reason. But yeah, he just I thought he was going to do better than he did. So I'll still use him as my answer, I guess.
Tigers fans were wishing it was only 1 year what they got out of him. But anyway,
the Panthers are going to love him.
Yeah, we'll see.
They'll fix him up. Trust me.
We'll talk about this at another later date. Who needs a big 2025? For mine, it was a bit of a...
All of them?
Who needs a big 25?
I'm going to say Dream Buller.
Oh, you got that before me again.
Is he back?
Who'd you say? Are you talking about me or Micka? You
Sorry, Micka. Who'd you say?
Who's got to have a big 2025? Luai.
Yeah. Fair.
Jay, you got someone?
I was actually going to say Dream Buller as well. I didn't feel his presence. Like, season 1, he blew us all away a little bit. Well, I mean, kind of. Season 2, I just didn't. I think he had that second season. You don't really notice him as much, but I think with their halves and that, he should hopefully pick up. He definitely needs to have a better season than he did.
What about our player of the year for the West Tigers? Jake, kick us off.
Galvin. Just, I don't know. It to me, it's got to be Galvin. He's frozen again. What about you, Micka?
Kick us off, Micka.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, right? He's got a very promising future, and he performed really well, even with all the pressure on him throughout the year. So, yeah, I reckon that's a no-brainer. Which is odd to pick the player of the year being so young. Like, he's still a kid.
Yeah.
And on debut.
Yeah.
Like debut season.
I will lock in Galvin as well. Sensational year from rookie. That's it, guys. Hope you all enjoyed our season reviews. Thank you for bearing with us. Apologies about some of the delays and the coverage sort of thing, but we got there in the end. I really appreciate you all liking the content. Make sure you give us some love, social media, that sort of things, the podcast, YouTube, all that jazz. You all know it by now. And again, let your friends, family, all that know. And bye for now. Thank you.
Later.